Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground magazine, and of course my esteemed co-host Mike Gast, former vice president of communications at Kamprounds of America, and he writes for RV Travel, and he also writes for the American Glamping Association, so they keep you pretty busy, Mike.
Yeah, I got a lot of deadlines that I'm behind on right now.
That's how you know a good writer is when they're behind on deadlines all the time, right?
Yeah, because we're never done. We're never done. Maybe one more week.
And our guest this week is Greg Emmert, founder of Cotinga Campground Consulting, and I hope I pronounced that right.
Sure did.
Greg used to own a Campgrounds of America park in Ohio, and I guess Greg, just talk to us a little bit about your owning the KOA and how you got into the consulting business.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, first, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. I want to give back to the industry as much as I can. It's part of the reason that I started the consulting gig. So we sold our park in December of 2020, but before that, my parents purchased it in August of '94. We owned and operated it for 26 years. It's 240 site campground on 119 acres here in Northeast Ohio. And we converted it to a KOA in 2012. So we had a little bit of time inside a franchise system, outside a franchise system, and camping, as anybody who's tuned into this knows, if you're a general manager, you're an owner, it is such an awesome industry to be involved in because, number one, you are never bored because you're constantly having to learn something new. It's such a dynamic thing. You've got to be good at a lot of stuff. And I think that's probably what I enjoyed about it the most, was the fact that work was, granted that was frustrating sometimes, but work was never boring, and it constantly challenges you, and just you're always growing.
Yeah, and some of the things you guys that you did at the park were pretty neat. I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, was just to talk a little bit about some of the activities you guys used to do at your park. You're really big into nature, ecology, that kind of stuff, and so just explain to us a little bit about how you fit that into your park. When you own the KOA, I guess.
Yeah, definitely was a big part of what I wanted to do. Part of that's selfish. I love doing that stuff, but that's the best part about being a business owner, right? You can build that business to be what you want it to be. So as a campground owner, I built the park to be the kind of park I'd want to stay at. And I built the activities to be the kind of activities I'd want to go into. So yeah, it made it really nice when you're having a really long, challenging day and you look down and you go, I got another activity to do. But this one happens to be a creek walk hike with a bunch of kids and adults, and we're going to go down and net some fish. And it started out as a selfish thing, but it really grew well. And I think that's because, events that are conservation based, they really touch people deeply, and they're very unique. Even the guests that I had that would have the most fun on these walks would be the most citified guests that I had, like the ones that just the previous day when they arrived would call the office and say, I saw a spider. Can you do something about it? Well, probably not, no, but I can come and tell you about why that spider is no big deal, or that it's pretty cool. So that same person that was standing on the picnic table screaming because they saw a spider was up in my grill the very next day when I would catch something cool and show them on one of the walks. Like, they were the most curious. So I found that to be really interesting. But it started out as a definitely being selfish, but it turned into something that I realized could really make our park stand out. And I mean, so if you go back to, it's been a number of years since U.S. Fish and Wildlife did the study. So they need to update the numbers, because these have certainly grown since this, because the pandemic, of course, really jumped people up into outdoor activities. But as of 2017, I think it is, 86 million US residents, so 34% of the population 16 and older, participated in wildlife watching activities. So 86 million people. Yeah, that's that's massive. I mean, when you stop and think about it, that is, so it's more than, and again, we're using 2018 numbers, but that's more than NASCAR, the Grand Canyon, the NFL, Disney World, and Las Vegas combined draw in a single year.
Greg, I was around KOA, lucky enough to be around KOA when you were doing this and getting started. And being green was very, very popular at the time. I remember back in the, after 2010, there was a big move to be green out there. And so you really were the leading edge of that for KOA. But the clientele back then was also probably a bit more experienced of a camper, a bit more experienced with the outdoors. Is it a bigger challenge nowadays that this huge influx of inexperienced outdoor people, they want to get outside, but they don't know how to do it, and they are a little bit fearful of it? Is that changed the approach?
I think it does a little bit, because you need to be, I tend to jump in with both feet, right? So I'm like, oh, let's get in the creek and let's walk around. And hey, look at this crayfish. I'm just going to grab it out of the creek. And, you pull it up and some people are like, are those pinchers? Ow! And they're like ready to dive out of the way, and it's like, oh, no, hold on a second. It's okay. This is cool. You're going to be fine. I'm not going to put it on you. I'm not going to do anything scary. But you give them a couple of minutes and all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's all these things around me that I have never even thought to look down at or sit still long enough to pay attention to. And that's really what this is about, right? Get people to pay attention to what's around them, sit still for a second, and all of a sudden they might care a little bit more about it. Well, then maybe they want to plant a pollinator plot in their garden. I was trying to plant seeds, right? And if you can plant a few seeds, people take those seeds home, and who knows what that sparks. So that was my side of it. But when you start to talk to other owners and they're like, I don't see what the point in this is. You tell them 86, million people, you tell them that wildlife watchers spent $11.6 billion on trips and 6.1 billion on food and lodging and 41.9 billion on specialty equipment, including things like vehicles, campers, ATVs, all that stuff that they need to come to your park and enjoy it. They're already spending on. You just have to tap that resource. You have to tap that portion of the outdoor, the camping public. And yeah, you can do that. Our park was in a fairly rural setting, but we had pretty good amenities too. We weren't out in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to be in the middle of nowhere to do this, and you don't have to have a park that's covered in forest. I mean, you can come up with some pretty good activities on a really small space and really low cost. I mean, what's it cost you to take a group on a hike? And then, you can also have things that tie in with that hike that you're marketing in your store. So you can turn these things into moneymakers, not just in, obviously you can get more camper nights if you can draw the right folks in, but you can also use that to drive sales in the store, different promotions. So it definitely has changed a bit, and your approach needs to be, somebody like me, I need to learn to slow my roll. I can't just jump in, right? You got to coax people into the water, so to speak, but they're still just as interested. Like I say, the part that always got me was that the folks that were most separated and the most citified, they were the ones that seemed to enjoy this stuff the most. And that always fascinated me.
So what activity was the biggest hit on your park?
Without question, was the nighttime insect walk, which again sounds really strange, but we called it the campfire chorus. And I don't know if you guys can hear right now. I'm on my porch and my headset's probably cutting it out, but this is the time of year we would do that because the singing insects really get going. Right now, there is a constant trill in the background of tree crickets, and they sing all day long, but then you get katydids and crickets that sing at night. And that's the chorus that's in the background while your campfire is crackling. So that became our, that's what we called it. And when we first did it, we had maybe 10 or 15 people show up. Our last year there, before we sold it, I had over 40 people join me for that. And they're walking out through the meadow and we're catching bugs in little collection containers. And we set up a moth sheet with a big light on it to bring the nighttime, the moths and different insects in to look at. And again, you would think that people would be freaked out by this. We're going out to look for bugs, and that by far was the most attended of any of our nature programs.
Well, and I think we've spoken, when we spoke last week, I think you had mentioned, just the type of people that it attracts to the campground too, because you're getting probably a lot more families when you're doing these kind of events, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When we bought the place, it was a pretty hard party in place, and we learned pretty quickly that we didn't want to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning quieting things down. So we had to do something, and so slowly we sort of tried to change the culture. It takes a very long time, and I started to steer the ship more around 2010, and started to push that a little bit harder and push the outdoor stuff. And yeah, you get people that they don't mind going to bed at 10 o'clock. And not that I mind folks staying up till 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning. If they do it quietly, it didn't bother me. But we advertised that we were going to have a quiet time in the park, right? So if I don't go out and enforce that, then I'm kind of that's sort of like a bait and switch. That's how I felt, right? So people came to the park, expected it to be quiet. So I didn't want to be up at 2 in the morning telling somebody that like Skinnerd is awesome, but you can't play it at volume level 600 right now. And as we transition towards more of this kind of activity, the park just got quieter and guests went to bed earlier, and it did. It attracted a whole different clientele. Yeah.
So is pushing people into what you learned from your old campground, is that part of the consulting business now? Is that what people are after?
So not that I've seen so far, sadly, although I try to lean it that way as much as I can. Part of what I do as a consultant, just to kind of stay true to myself, is if I'm looking for a solution, whether it be operational, a CapEx improvement, I try to find the most sustainable and green solution that I can and present that to my client. Now, I'm not going to present that as the only solution, of course, but yeah, I try to always make sure that I'm pushing the greenest, the most equitable, the most sustainable solutions that I possibly can, because not only do I find that important personally, but I think that that's a good way to approach your business as a campground owner. If we're not taking full advantage of any business owner, if you're not taking full advantage of all your resources, you're leaving things on the table. As a campground owner, the outdoors are part of your resources. And I think too much of the time we find ourselves fighting them, right? This tree over here I got to take that tree down. I got another bee's nest in the ground over there. This lady called. She says she's got some critter burrowing under a wood pile. I don't know what all this stuff is. But if you can look at those things instead of problems as opportunities, then there's a different approach to them, right? And if you can educate people, maybe. I used to have people all the time, they'd ask me to come and kill a snake. I saw a snake, I kill a snake. All right, I'm not going to kill any snakes. I'm going to go educate them about that snake. Before I know it, 2 weeks later, they're sending me pictures going, oh, look, it's back again. And I know I don't have to worry about it anymore. And it's just controlling the mice around my campsite. Thanks for talking me down off the ledge. That's terrific. I don't have that kind of close guest interaction obviously anymore as a consultant, but yeah, I guess sort of wildlife conflicts would be on my list of services that I could help folks with.
So what other resources did you use, and what else is out there for campground owners right now other than you, that they can go to try to learn what they should do first?
So if they're looking for, partnerships are great, right? If they're looking for sort of the events like Ben was talking about before, you've got your local Department of Natural Resources or your local park system, universities, conservation clubs. Another one of our big activities was stargazing. We bought a telescope, cost around $500. It's a Celestron. It's a Nexstar. If you buy one of those, you've actually got an astronomer with you. So this thing, we could set it up, you do a quick alignment, turn on the little GPS, and it would actually take you celestial body to celestial body one at a time and point them right out in the sky. So that made my job easy. Then we met an amateur astronomer who had this 7-foot long, 20-inch telescope and was just like, he was so excited to have some place to go and host what he called star parties. So we found Don and just away we went. And there's another one. You find an astronomy club, I'll guarantee you that club is full of people who would love to come to your place and show off their equipment and show off their knowledge of the night sky. So partnerships, right? It's just like so many other things in business. If you can find the right people to partner with, you can, because not everybody has a resident nerd like me at their campground, right? So you might need to go out and find one, but they're certainly available out there.
I like the stargazing. I think we've spoken before about the stargazing. It's kind of an interesting, you mentioned like the stargazing clubs. A lot of those free resources in the community that park owners maybe just don't think about. I know, you mentioned the astronomy clubs. There's also like, so, Department of Natural Resource
Yep.
things that you can take advantage of, different types of natural environment clubs in your area that you might be able to take advantage of. And a lot of these people like to come and just be able to talk. And I think you mentioned to me previously, you had some guy that came out and just did an awesome job with the astronomy stuff.
Yeah, that was Don. That's who I was speaking about before. And actually, he ended up bringing a friend on a couple things, and then they had two telescopes and two guys there where they could show two celestial bodies at a time. They love to talk about what they know, share their knowledge. I mean, and a lot of these places too. To go back to, you were talking about the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, or the park systems. They may not have somebody who can come to your place, but they might be able to help you develop the resources that you need to then put on these activities. So I'm very fortunate. My wife is she works in information and education for the state of Ohio for the Department of Natural Resources. It's quite literally a match made in heaven. Like, I don't know how I got that lucky, but I did. And she does this for people right now. She'll, teachers, educators on all different levels, they will call her up and she might say, well, listen, I don't come out and do programs, but let me help you figure out what your program will look like, and let's figure out how we can put some resources together for you. And she's built an entire system of traveling trunks, she calls them. So there's a mammal trunk and a bird's trunk and a reptile's trunk. And if she gets a teacher that wants to do programs about mammals for her students, biology teacher or something, they can call her up, rent one of these trunks, costs nothing. It's not a rent. They just go sign it out, get it, take it to the classroom. You could do that very same thing at your campground. You could use these things there. If you don't have someone that can do it, odds are you can find somebody. Sadly, as great a job as they do informing the public, park naturalists don't make a lot of money. And I'm all for bumping up their pay. If anyone out there who's a park naturalist is listening, I'm all for getting you more money because you do a great job. But they might be willing to come to your park if there's a weekend they don't have programs. It's just about checking around and finding someone who can help you build those resources.
Now, we've got a lot of new owners in the pictures now, Greg, that a lot of corporate owners, a lot of investment groups coming in. Are they as likely to be amenable to the natural side of developing activities as the typical mom and pops?
So I've certainly seen a little bit of both. That's a really great question. I think that's probably 50-50. When you look at what the folks at Spacious Skies are doing, they seem to really be pushing that natural side of it. Get an hour outside of a major city, and we'll put you up somewhere where you'll forget all about hustle and bustle, because we know that you want to get underneath some trees and relax a little bit. You want to get out of that concrete jungle and into a real jungle. But yeah, there are certainly other folks that are just interested in, how many campsites can I get on 4 square inches and how much can I charge for it? And, they'll happily mow down all the trees in order to get that done. But so that's challenging for me. I'm fortunate right now that I have one client that's very large. They have several properties, and they're very much into conservation. So I'm kind of fortunate in that way. They already see the benefit of it. They're not necessarily building, they're new to the campground asset class. So they're not necessarily building the activities program, but they're at least developing their parks in a way that maximizes the natural space and natural resources that they have on the campground. So that's great. Because I would certainly, I would take a job with a park that wanted to just maximize every square inch, but it would probably hurt me a little. It would hurt me a little bit inside if I had to do that. But yeah, it's kind of a mix right now, and I don't know. I guess I couldn't speak about whether or not they will continue that way, but I certainly hope so. Because if people wanted to camp in a completely sterile environment, you can camp for free at a lot of Walmarts, right? How come there aren't just tons of RVs in there on the weekend tailgating and running their generators and boondocking? Because they want trees, they want blue skies, they want flowers, they want nature. They may not know they want it, but they want it. Otherwise, they'd be in that Walmart parking lot with a little, propane fire pit and just hanging out, watching TV, throwing cornhole with their buddies. But they're not. They're at campgrounds. And Well, of course, one of the biggest complaints now is nobody can get a reservation anywhere, right? But so that shows there again, they really want to be in a campground.
Yeah, and
So go ahead, Ben.
And I think a lot of these parks, even like the bigger, larger corporate ones, are using some of these natural experiences to add to their amenities list. I know like Sun Outdoors is like crabbing. They feature like parks that do crabbing and fishing. And I've never been crabbing. That kind of sounds neat. And then I know like RVC Outdoors does like they have their bee program that they do. I think it's called Bee Cause. That where they put beehives at each of their parks and educational materials around the bees, which is kind of interesting. So it is interesting how some of these parks will incorporate that into their programming and add it as an experience. That's something that glamping has kind of taught all of us, is that people really value the experiences. And now you have the agriculture tourism that's starting to pop up more, where people are camping on farms and doing chores and stuff, which kind of seems odd, but people love interacting with the animals. So
Absolutely.
So Greg, you mentioned being on the lookout for those opportunities, those easy opportunities. We've got a lot of floods in the east. We've got a lot of fires in the west. Is that natural phenomenon an opportunity for campgrounds too? When a disaster strikes?
That's an excellent question. Obviously, not for any of the campground owners that are in the path of those things, for sure, right? Like those folks can be devastated by that stuff. But anything that leads someone down the path, at least in my mind, leads them down the path of conservation. Maybe makes them think a little more about their water usage. Maybe makes them think a little more about, am I clearing out? Do I have a lot of fire? Do I have fuel on my property, right? Am I managing my place not just in a way that's good for my business long term, but good for the environment as well? And I think those things do definitely intersect. And so I know, there's a lot of what do I want to say? Certainly folks that believe that the climate's changing, certainly folks that believe that the climate's not. But it's difficult to see when you look at look what happened in Dallas this week, right? 7 inches of rain in a day. I mean, that's so we've moved from calling them 100-year floods to 1,000-year floods, and yet for some odd reason they happen, a couple times a month somewhere in the country. So I don't think they're 100 or 1,000-year floods anymore. They're going to continue to happen, and if we can keep, people conscious of how they live their lives and the small decisions they make that lead up and have bigger impacts, then I think that's definitely an opportunity. And that was always what I was trying to do. Like I said, I was trying to plant seeds, and if I could get somebody to just think about something a little bit differently, I felt like I won. They didn't have to go home and start giving half their paycheck to the World Wildlife Fund, but just think about life and the things around you a little bit differently. And I think park owners have that opportunity too.
Yeah, that brings us to a question. It seems like that Ben and I talk about every week, no matter who the guest is electronic vehicles and what the role of a campground is in EVs. Do you see a lot of interest from campground owners in making the EV stations be part of what they're doing with the natural settings?
So I have not yet, but the parks that I've been working at are not in areas where they're necessarily getting like high traffic counts going by. They're mostly, these parks are destination parks. And so they're not really seeing heavy EV traffic, but I have spoken to owners that are near highways and things. There's sort of, what would be a KOA journey, that sort of thing, right? Where folks are just in and out and down the road, and they're definitely kicking it around, but I haven't seen any really, nobody's really jumped into it, which I find to be interesting because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but every time I turn my head, I feel like I see an EV now, a Bolt or a Tesla or I'm losing track on the Hyundai, but the infrastructure's got to keep going. And I mean, as a park owner, if you could put in a charger or two, a paid charger or two, I think that's an excellent opportunity for folks, especially where cabins and accommodations are concerned, right? Most folks, in fact, I don't know anybody that's towing with an electric. What the Lightning just came out, the Ford Lightning, the Rivian, I don't think has much of a tow rating. And that really kills the electric vehicle range. But certainly with accommodations, whether it be glamping or typical like a KOA cabin, I think there's awesome opportunity there to stack a little charging unit right in on your accommodations and either include it in the nightly rate or, you know, have it a paid station. Yeah, I hope anyway that that's going to start catching on. But to answer your question, I haven't seen that really gaining momentum, and that's kind of surprising to me, to be honest.
Do you think some of the rural areas that parks are in will probably start seeing that infrastructure be built here soon, or is it going to be kind of like starting from the cities and kind of moving out, I guess?
That's the way it feels like it's going. Yeah, it's sort of matching urban sprawl, right? As that kind of crawls out from city centers, so are the charging stations. Like when you look at the map, there are a few in rural areas, but yeah, I have not seen the park owners in rural areas starting to jump on it yet.
Yeah, I think they have created some funding options, grants in some states and different things that I think park owners should take a look at when they are thinking about doing stuff like that. I think this new infrastructure bill that was passed last month has some of that stuff in there as well to help spur the EV infrastructure stuff forward. So I guess we'll have to see. Um, I know at the local dealership, the local Ford dealership, they got a Lightning in the other day, so you can go up there and look at it, and people are kind of interested.
So Greg, how much do you miss owning a campground? When are you going to buy another one?
Have you been reading my emails? Have you been reading my emails? Mike is in my email. Okay,
I'm everywhere.
I have been looking since we sold it. I haven't really. The market is so crazy right now that it's very difficult. It seems like everybody who has a campground for sale thinks that they have the, you know, goose laying golden eggs, and so the valuations are kind of crazy at this point. Not that I'm not still looking, just out of curiosity. But yeah, I have been looking. I miss aspects of it. We were there for so long and we hit so many rough patches, especially towards the end, that when we sold it, it was right on time. Like we did, especially for my parents at their age and what they were able to do. We sold it right on time, and it really was just perfect for all of us. But I certainly miss the land, being a conservationist. I work with the ownership there as a consultant and project manager. We just finished up 11 red carpet sites. They're really nice. But when I go out, I still go visit my favorite trees, and I might hop down in the creek and go wander up to my favorite spot and sit down on my favorite rock. Like there's that part that I miss. I miss a lot of the people. There were some great people that we met there over the years, and so I see them occasionally if I'm there working on something. But the stress of that thing, especially towards the end, that COVID year, it wore on us so hard that it was really time for us to go. So it honestly, I can't believe I'm sitting here saying it, because I talked to Chip Hannawalt about this. You said earlier, you know, Chip, and I said I keep waiting to wake up and go, damn, I wish I hadn't sold that. I really regret it. And that hasn't happened yet. And he said the same thing about their place. He kept waiting. Oh boy, I wish I hadn't gotten rid of that part. But it's been really good. And I like the consulting end of it. I get to use the knowledge that I have of the industry. But I'm still looking. So stay out of my inbox, Mike.
Well, I know what you mean about the frantic nature. I've watched quite a few websites where people are talking about their campground and putting it up for sale, and you'll see these tiny parks, and sometimes 12 sites that'll come popping up with a valuation over $1 million, and there's people saying, "Oh yeah, give me a call, instant message me, I'm interested." It just amazes me that there's this frantic nature in they just think it's the pot of gold out there right now. And I guess done right, if you with the long look, it definitely is. It's still a great business to be in. It was a great business to be in 20 years ago, and it's just more so now. And but are you seeing a more educated buyer come in than before? I know that I know you went through KOA University when I was there, and it was it was always stunning when you saw people that hadn't been in the business like your family was show up there and give their reason for buying a park, but they had no background in that aspect. They might have run their own business, they might have sold their business to get into the campground business, but their reasons were all over the place. You know, that our favorite response was always, "Oh, we love to camp," and our response was, "Well, you're never camping again, because you're running a campground now. You're taking care of campers." And so I guess my question is, are they more informed, or they're more naive coming in?
So you know what? It's actually both at the same time. Like, they're more informed because, especially the bigger investors. So they're more informed because they've been in commercial real estate for a long time, right? But at the same time, they've never been in this asset class. And they think, well, I can apply these metrics that I've used for these other asset classes and just apply them to campgrounds, because I heard, I got this tip, and I know these people that own one, and they're really making good money. So, well, I can buy a campground and make good money, and we can do this within just a year or two. Well, that's not going to happen. To your point, Mike, the long look is really important when you buy a campground. You have to, especially if you're buying something that's a value add asset. If you're going to go out and try to do a value add, and somebody tells you you're going to have those books up in 3 years, count on 5 or 6, because it takes a lot more time to get your camper nights trending upward. So yeah, it's a little bit of both at the same time. They're both savvy because they've been in commercial real estate, but they're not savvy because they've not been in the campground space. And it's funny that you say what you do about your KOAU participants, because that was us. So my dad, genius that he is, he's not watching this, so I can say these things. He bought the reason that we thought, I'm going to say I was in on it, so I'm partially responsible. But since he's not here, I can put all the weight on him. The reason he thought that it would be a great idea is because we were campers. And he had been helping out the owners with projects just for fun while we were there. And like, this seems like a good time. Well, I can do this. And I always wanted to own my own business. We're going to let's find a campground to buy, because we're campers, so we know a thing or two about it. And it took about 20 minutes behind the desk on the other side to realize that we knew nothing about it. And then started the education. It was quite shocking when you find out what goes into it, and when you realize that you can't be buddies with your campers anymore like you could when you were sitting around the fire with them, and they're customers, they're not friends. It took a really long time for us to get it, and we were still learning at the end. I mean, obviously it's a constant learning experience, but yeah, definitely seeing both sides of that buyer's coin. I'm seeing savvy and not so savvy because of the inexperience in the space.
I thought that all park owners sat back with some beers and around the campfire in the evenings and chilled
continuously. Yeah, we get, and when you close, I mean, we were closed for 6 months. We just sat around on our thumbs and admired our work from afar, and we just collected all that money that was coming in while the campground was closed. And it's all those things. You just you don't have to do anything in the winter. Yep, that's the campground myth right there. And yes, all those things are true.
You mentioned at the beginning of the show about some of the profit stuff that the campground owners can do centered around some of these activities you had mentioned. I guess, can you just talk about that a little bit more, about like what kinds of things you guys were selling in your shops, and like what kind of potential there is for like park owners to provide things that they can make money off of, I guess, for these?
Yeah, so we didn't necessarily, I will admit straight away that I wasn't the greatest with my camp store. Towards the end, I had an excellent employee named Jennifer, and she got my camp store just rocking. She really enjoyed ordering things, and she, because I could delegate that to her instead of trying to do a billion things myself, which I'm very guilty of. She would see the events coming up and say, "Oh, we look at this thing over here at Wilcor. If we ordered a case of these, and I bet they sell really well because they tie to that event." So, but we would have on hand things like little, like kid-sized binoculars, the plastic trifold field guides for birds and flowers and things like that, night sky. We sold, I think I had for a little while, I had little laser pointers. Those got to be a little annoying. That's the only problem with that. People go around pointing them where they shouldn't be. But like for the astronomy, the astronomers, or if I was doing it, use laser pointer to point into the sky to the celestial bodies you're showing. Well, now people can use those to point out to their friends and family when they're back on their site. So they've got their little trifold field guide, they've got a laser pointer, maybe the kids have binoculars. You could sell, I mean, they have those little, I always love the little bug huts, right? Gives you a little thing you can put insect in and kind of watch them. All that kind of stuff you can tie out to your activities. But I didn't do as good a job promoting that kind of stuff as I should have, probably, to actually tie in with specific events. But that opportunity is definitely there, because these people, like I said, $41 million on RVs. They're clearly ready to spend their money on this stuff. I go on birding trips. I'm a bird nerd, and so I've been to Honduras a couple times. I've been to Panama once. I went to Colombia once right before the pandemic. Those tours cost a good bit of money, and people are willing to pay that to go travel somewhere to see something specific. So even more so for parks that are near an attraction, like, if you're near a national park, that's easy. That's low hanging fruit. But really you could, so we used to raise and release monarch butterflies. And that had a certain group of our campers in our store 4 or 5 times a day. Once they got to their little chrysalis stage and they were getting ready to go, I'd put updates on Facebook. Oh, we've got one about ready to hatch and we're going to get it out and tag it soon. And before you know it, there's 10 kids filing in the store. Is it out yet? No, it's not out yet. Want some ice cream? So you just kind of work that in there while they're in the store. But it's all that stuff brought them down there and brought people in. One of my biggest Facebook posts ever, we saw a bird called an American bittern. They're not rare, but they're not common, and they're very difficult to see. And first time in 26 years, I had seen one at the property. I got a picture of it. I put it on Facebook. I boosted the post, and the thing was liked over 3,000 times and shared hundreds of times. And over the next few weeks, we had people booking with us that would write in their little notes, can we see the bittern? Is it still there? Are we going to be able to see that? So there you go. So I off of a bird sighting, I drove reservations for a couple of weeks up. So It doesn't necessarily have to be something in the store. You can just use that experience to boost out, use the right hashtags on that post, hit the right people with it, and sure, well, geez, I'm into birds. I want to go check out that guy's campground.
Yeah. So Greg, do you see a time when naturalist skills are going to be a marketable skill for work campers? I've looked at a lot of work campers' resumes and really haven't ever seen that listed. And that people are as interested as you are in this. And it just seems like it's something that an owner ought to be looking for, be aware of when somebody has that skill.
I agree with you 100%. And no, I haven't seen that listed. Everybody's got their pretty typical, generally speaking, if it's a work camper, right? She works front of house, he works back of house. He can do some maintenance, she can do some front desk. Sometimes it's opposite. Sometimes it's a housekeeping team. But it's really because owners aren't looking for it, right? If the demand is there, then someone will fill that, but the demand's not there. So I feel like I still need to do my part to get owners kind of on the hook for that. And I presented a lot of this. I actually did present at Arvik in 2018. I wasn't able to be there in person, but I did it virtually, and gave a whole presentation about this outdoor conservation type activities and how you can monetize it and why you should do it, at least in my opinion. And apparently I need to get that word out a little more, because I think it's fantastic, because honestly, it can help you not just through the events, but every campground has wildlife conflict, whether it be raccoons in your trash, or if you're maybe further north or you're out west, maybe you've got to keep people bear aware. It's not a bad idea to have somebody on your crew that can handle those conversations and turn them into something where I guess maybe isn't afraid to go outside their camper because there's those marauding skunks that are going to, carry them away in the night or spray them all down, including their pet. If you can educate them about that stuff, they're just happier in your park. They're more relaxed.
Yeah, we have a question from a viewer. How has the lack of contractors impacted your schedules? So have you dealt with anyone that's been impacted by
Oh
the
my
lack of
goodness.
contractors?
Yes. Good question, Rob. Yeah, there's been a couple of parks in particular, and they're a little more far flung, right? They're not quite as close to a larger urban center. But there are two parks that are like black holes when it comes to contractors. Um, in fact, at one over in Indiana, if we didn't have this one contractor, we would have no one. And we're fortunate that he's knowledgeable enough that he can do a lot of work. He can do a lot of excavation. He can do tree work, but he also knows some folks that are into plumbing, electrical, things like that, because without him, we'd have nothing. I mean, it took, we've been trying to get architecturals done for a bathroom remodel that we want to gut the whole building, turn it into suites. And I have to tell you, I don't know, I've contacted probably close to a dozen architectural firms, and I got one response and had some traction with them. And then after a couple of weeks, they disappeared.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really hard, Rob, very hard. So if you're in the same boat, keep treading water, because it's really, really tough right now. And it's not just contractors, it's the materials as well. We're getting ready to do an electrical upgrade at one in Maryland, and the suppliers all told us the same thing. Now, they could be creating artificial demand to get us to spend some money quickly, but looking down the pike, they're like, I don't know how much longer our inventory of supplies is going to be solid. You're going to want to get these things now and get them on site, because we can see coming down the pike, we're going to run out of breakers. And of course, I bet there's not a campground owner out there that hasn't somewhere along the way lamented the cost of PVC. Right now, it's crazy at 3 and 4 times what it used to be per 10-foot stick.
Yeah. Rob mentioned that's number one problem we have in attracting contractors for remote locations as well. He also asked design build. I'm not exactly for sure what he's referencing there.
I am not either, unfortunately. But yeah, Rob, burn your fingers up, man. That's all you can do. Just keep calling.
But I know when I spoke with Kelly Jones a few weeks ago for an article I wrote for Woodall's that was up last week, she mentioned that they have parks for the Great Escapes brand that she's been working on. They have one in Texas that's just waiting on electrical pedestals and like electrical parts. So I mean, even like the supply chain issues are really slowing down the developments. That she said the park was pretty much ready to open. They're just waiting for these electrical parts, and they had ordered them before COVID, and they still don't have them, which seems kind of mind-boggling just to think about.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just amazing what some of these developments are getting held up by, and then other developments just seem to be built and they don't seem to have very many issues at all. So
yeah, it's very regional. Park in Maryland, we did where we're getting ready to do electric. We did a restroom remodel. Contractor was able to find about 80% of his materials and then just hit a wall. So
yeah.
I started looking here in my backyard in Ohio. I was able to find the other 20%, and the shipping was outrageous, but I was going to make another site visit anyway. So I loaded stuff up in the Subaru and just headed to Maryland. So it is very regional. And if you don't have somebody that's able to, was very fortunate that I had suppliers around me that had the stuff, and we could keep them supplied, or we'd find stuff on Amazon to supplement the things that he couldn't find and have it shipped to the park. But the cost right now is astronomical too. And I think Mike did, I don't know if you saw it, or Ben, maybe you saw it too, but I think Toby O'Rourke from KOA was recently quoted as saying new site builds are between 10 and 15,000 a site. And those red carpets, the red carpets we did at my old place came in right around 14. And I felt good about that. But I used to be able to build a campsite for myself for about $5,000. And I've run into walls with that too, talking to people about new builds. They want some consulting help on a new build or on a value add. And well, how much should we budget per site? And I tell them $10,000 to $15,000. And they, hello, sir, are you there? Are you, they're passed out cold, because they were expecting that, oh no, that's not true. I can go in, I'll have my guy dig it, and I'll have you better get your plan review stuff in order. And you can't just, make sure your permitting's done right, make sure you're even zoned to do this kind of stuff, and then make sure you have somebody who's licensed. And you don't just want to go in and dig all this stuff and do it yourself. It's a huge investment. You want to make sure you're doing this stuff by the letter, you know, and your issuing authorities are all happy with you and you've got your permits all in order. Because in the end, if you save yourself a few bucks trying to go out and do it on your own, then you get time comes to sell the asset and somebody comes through and does an inspection and finds that you didn't get any of it permitted, then you're just out cash. So that per site cost is crazy, but you definitely don't want to play with that.
Yeah, and I think Toby O'Rourke mentioned this spring at an RV event I was at that it's also taking about 3 to 4 years to do a ground up development project. So they average about 3 to 4 years from start to finish. So, which I think is kind of surprising to some developers too, who may think they can get through the process a little bit quicker. But you just never know with permitting and everything. That's definitely regional too. So,
yep.
So, but well, I think that's about all the time we have for today, anyways, Greg. So it was great to have you on. It was
Thank
great
you so much for having me on, guys.
Good to see you again, Greg.
In the background. So, thanks everyone for watching, and we hope you guys all like the show. And see you guys next week. So.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.